The shriek of tortured metal finally died down, replaced by an unnerving silence broken only by the hiss of escaping steam and the frantic thumping of Kalen Vance's own heart. The Hermes was a wreck, tilted drunkenly against a colossal rock formation that looked like a petrified giant's hand reaching for Xylos's twin sons. He ran a quick systems check, his fingers flying across the damaged console. Life support, intact, miraculously. Hull integrity, 68%, not great, but not catastrophic. Communications, fried, but potentially reparable. Could have been worse. Much worse. Lyra Zath unstrapped herself with a surprising, almost unnerving, lack of panic, smoothing down her immaculate gray tunic as if they'd just experienced mild turbulence. So, we're stranded. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd just survived. Temporarily, Kalen corrected, already pulling an emergency kit from under the console. He stood, his imposing frame filling the cramped cockpit. Temporarily. We're stranded on a godforsaken dust ball, you fool. Lyra snapped, her composure finally cracking like thin ice. Her amber eyes, usually so cool and distant, now blazed with a mix of fear and fury. It was almost a relief to see some genuine emotion from her. Kalen ignored the jibe. He was a professional, a veteran of the Kthar War. He'd dealt with worse than a spoiled princess. We're actually not far from Xylos City. Maybe a 2-day trek on foot, if we push it. I can try to fix the emergency beacon, but it might take a while for rescue to arrive. He pulled out 2 bulky environmental suits, tossing one towards her. Put this on. Lyra caught it as if it were a diseased rodent, her nose wrinkling in disgust. This thing. It's hideous. And it smells faintly of human. The disdain dripped from every syllable. It's clean, Kalen said, his voice tight, already pulling his own suit over his combat gear. And more importantly, it will keep you alive. Xylos might look like a standard desert, but it's home to some of the most dangerous flora in the Cygnus Reach. Those tall, blue-tinged plants out there. The Xylosian neurospike. Their spines can pierce standard body armor. One scratch, and the neurotoxin paralyzes you within minutes. Understand? This isn't a royal garden party, princess. He paused, running a hand through his light brown hair, trying to gauge her reaction. But as he did, a flicker on a dying diagnostic screen caught his eye. A brief, inexplicable energy spiked, somewhere outside the ship, near the crash site. It wasn't Zathian, wasn't Alliance, it was just strange. What was that? Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Probably just a sensor ghost, a phantom from the crash. He had hit pretty hard. Still, an unsettling feeling prickled at the back of his neck. He needed to focus. Lyra, however, wasn't focusing. She tossed the suit aside with a dismissive flick of her wrist. I am not wearing that piece of garbage. My Zathian skin is sensitive to your primitive synthetic fabrics. Besides, she added, a superior tilt to her chin, my species evolved on a world far harsher than this dust bowl. We possess a natural resilience to most toxins. We're just going outside to assess the damage, correct? I want to feel real sunlight on my skin after days cooped up in this metal box. She sauntered towards the exit hatch, the tight-fitting shorts she wore doing little to hide her curves. She looked back, expecting him to follow like an obedient servant. Kalen sighed, a deep, weary sound. The woman was infuriatingly beautiful and impossibly, dangerously stubborn. A lethal combination on a planet like Xylos. Your funeral, princess, he muttered, the words barely audible. He watched her go, a strange mix of exasperation and an undeniable, unwelcome attraction churning within him. He made one last attempt, a final warning born from years of survival training. Last chance, he warned, holding up the suit again. Those Silosian neurospikes aren't just decorative. They're evolutionary killing machines. They want to hurt you. They can smell weakness a mile away. Lyra just rolled her eyes, her silver hair shimmering in the dim emergency light. Your human paranoia is almost quaint, Captain. Perhaps you should stay here if you're so scared. Your funeral, Kalen muttered again, this time to himself, securing his own helmet. He couldn't force her. Zathian royalty and all that. But a knot of dread tightened in his gut. This felt wrong. Terribly wrong. The hatch hissed open, releasing a blast of hot, dry air that smelled of baked rock and alien spice. Lyra stepped out, her head held high, a picture of confidence as she surveyed the alien landscape under the glare of the twin suns. Kalen followed, his own eyes constantly scanning their surroundings through his helmet's protective visor. The Hermes had carved a deep furrow in the red sand, ending in a small clearing. And surrounding that clearing, almost like silent, blue-tinged sentinels, stood clusters of the tall cacti. Their spines, some nearly a foot long and sharp as surgical needles, glinted menacingly. They seemed almost aware. See. Lyra gestured expansively, turning back to him with a triumphant smirk. Perfectly safe. You humans are so, Her words cut off, replaced by a piercing scream that echoed across the desert silence. In her triumphant turn, she had backed directly into a dense cluster of Silosian neurospikes. They punched through her clothing with sickening ease, embedding themselves deep into the soft, orange-tinted flesh of her thighs and buttocks. Racing against the toxin's kiss. Don't move. Kalen's voice, sharp and cold as space itself, cut through her scream. He launched himself forward, his military training taking over, his movements swift and sure despite the bulky suit. He reached her side in an instant, his gloved hand surprisingly gentle as he steadied her, preventing any further contact with the vicious Silosian neurospikes. Every movement drives them deeper. Stay. Still. Tears, hot and unexpected, welled in Lyra's amber eyes. The haughty princess vanished, replaced by a terrified young woman. She froze, every muscle tensed, her breath catching in her throat. It burns, she choked out, her voice tight with pain. Kalen, it burns. Get them out. Get them out. The desperation in her voice was raw, primal. I know. I know it hurts. Just breathe, Kalen said, his voice softening slightly. He carefully guided her away from the menacing cluster of cacti, supporting most of her weight as her legs began to tremble uncontrollably. I warned you, he couldn't help but say, though the "I told you so" satisfaction was drowned out by a wave of genuine concern and a frustrating sense of déjà vu, always the hard way with these highborn types. Let's get you back inside. Now. Once back in the relative safety of the Hermes's cramped medical bay, little more than a cot and a flickering scanner, he eased her down onto her stomach. The air was thick with tension, the only sounds her ragged breaths and the ominous hum of the failing ship. I need to remove these spines. Immediately. This neurotoxin, it spreads quickly. We don't have time to waste. Just do it, she hissed through clenched teeth, burying her face in the thin mattress. Her pride was shattered, but a spark of her usual fire remained in that command. Kalen retrieved the medical kit, his movements efficient and practiced. He cut away the expensive fabric of her shorts around the embedded spines. Dozens of them, long and blue, studded her orange-tinted skin like grotesque jewels. He tried to maintain clinical detachment, to see only the injury, not the woman. It was difficult. The vulnerability beneath the arrogance was disarming. "This will hurt," he warned again, applying a topical anesthetic spray. He hoped it would work on Zathian physiology. "It already hurts, you imbecile," she retorted, though her insult dissolved into a sharp gasp as he grasped the first spine with a pair of medical tweezers and pulled. It came out with a sickening little plink sound. "Stay still," he instructed, his voice gentler now, almost against his will. "The more you move, the more the toxin spreads. We need to get every last one." For the next 20 minutes, Kalen worked with focused intensity. Spine after spine was extracted, each one bringing a whimper or a sharp intake of breath from Lyra. Her initial complaints and insults gradually subsided, replaced by a vulnerability that stirred something protective deep within him, much to his own irritation. He was just the pilot. The babysitter. Wasn't he? Almost done, he assured her, though his own concern was mounting. He didn't like what he was seeing. Around each puncture site, her skin was developing an alarming bluish tinge. Her breathing had become shallow, almost imperceptible, and her body trembled beneath his hands, not just from pain, but from something deeper, more systemic. "I feel strange," she murmured, her voice slurring, losing its sharp edge. "Cold, but hot. Like fire and ice, inside me." Kalen quickly grabbed the medical tricorder and ran a scan. His jaw tightened. Damn it. The readings were bad. Really bad. The toxin spreading faster than I expected. Your Zathian resilience isn't holding up. He prepared an injection of broad-spectrum antitoxin, knowing it was a long shot. It might not be specific enough for this particularly nasty Xylosian venom. He administered the shot. "Stay with me, Lyra," he urged, gently turning her onto her back. Her eyes were unfocused, her pupils dilated to black pools. "Talk to me. Tell me about Zath Prime." "So, right here," she whispered, her hand reaching up, unsteadily, to touch his face, his helmet long since removed. Her fingers, surprisingly cool, traced his jawline with an unexpected tenderness. You're not terrible, for a human." Despite the gravity of the situation, a small smile tugged at Kalen's lips. "High praise from Her Highness." "Not a princess," she mumbled, her words drifting. "Just, important father." Her hand fell away as her eyes fluttered closed. The medical scanner blared a sharp, insistent warning. Her vital signs were weakening. Fast. No, Kalen muttered, grabbing another dose of antitoxin. This wasn't happening. "Don't you dare die on my watch, princess." He activated the ship's emergency medical protocols. The AI's synthesized voice confirmed his fears, immediate treatment required. Xylosian neurospike antivenom. Available only at authorized settlements or medical facilities. Settlements. Plural. But the nearest one was a day's journey on foot. Maybe more. But the map, yes, the map showed a trading post, much closer. Just a few hours away, if he ran. Could he make it? Could she make it? He had no choice. He couldn't wait for a rescue that might never come. He made the decision in a heartbeat. He carefully lifted Lyra's now unconscious form, surprised at how light she felt in his arms. Her silver hair spilled over his armored forearm, and her head rested against his chest. Even unconscious, feverish, and dying, there was something undeniably alluring about her. Focus, Vance. You just had to be stubborn, didn't you? He said softly, securing her as best he could in the co-pilot's seat. He programmed the ship to broadcast a distress signal, a faint hope, then packed essential supplies, water, medkit, and the tricorder. He was leaving her alone, vulnerable. The thought made his stomach clench. He had to trust she'd hold on. He had to trust he could get back in time. He took one last look at her pale, still face. He whispered, a promise more to himself than to her, "Hang on, Lyra. I'm coming back." He sealed his helmet, opened the hatch, and stepped out into the harsh, unforgiving glare of the twin suns, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm against his ribs. He had to run. He had to race the toxin's deadly kiss. As Kalen plunged into the unforgiving Xylosian desert, a desperate whisper echoed in the silent cockpit behind him. "Kalen. Don't leave me." Lyra Zath, the proud Zathian princess, stirred in her unconscious state, her eyes fluttering open to reveal glassy, fever-bright depths. It was the first time she had used his name, a fragile plea lost to the empty ship as Kalen sprinted towards a desperate hope. His boots pounded the red sand, the twin suns beating down with merciless intensity. Each breath was a fire in his lungs, Xylos's thin atmosphere a constant reminder of their precarious situation. The portable tricorder strapped to his wrist beeped with an increasingly erratic rhythm, Lyra's life signs. They were fading. He pushed harder, ignoring the protesting ache in his muscles. He pictured her face, no longer haughty, but vulnerable, trusting him in a way she never would have consciously. He had to make it. Meanwhile, back in the wrecked Hermes, Lyra floated. She was adrift in a chaotic sea of blue light, a swirling vortex of fevered dreams and hallucinations, the neurotoxin rewriting her reality. The carefully constructed walls of her Zathian upbringing, the layers of protocol and expectation, crumbled away. She saw her father, Chancellor Zath, his face a mask of disappointment. "Father," she cried out, her dream voice thin and reedy. "I've failed you. Again." The apparition shook its head, its amber eyes cold. "Always disappointing. You never measure up to your brothers. What use is a daughter who cannot even follow simple instructions? Who cannot fulfill her most basic duty?" The words cut deeper than any physical pain. Tears streamed down her face as the scene shifted, dissolving and reforming. Now she stood before the Zathian Council, their stern, judgmental gazes piercing her very soul. "Unworthy of your bloodline," they chanted in unison, their voices echoing in the blue void. "Forever trying to prove yourself. Forever falling short." "No," she whispered, her dream self sinking to her knees, the weight of a lifetime of failure crushing her. "I am worthy. I am strong." But even in her dreams, the words sounded hollow. Then, the council chamber dissolved, replaced by a strangely familiar sight, the interior of Kalen's ship. But this version was different. It was bathed in a warm, golden light, comforting and safe. And there he was. Kalen. Standing before her, not in his bulky combat suit, but in simple human clothes, his form radiating a raw, uncomplicated strength that called to something primal deep within her, something she hadn't known existed. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Dream Kalen said, and his voice was deeper, more resonant than she remembered, a sound that vibrated through her. "I see you, Lyra. Not the Chancellor's daughter. Not the princess. Just you." He approached, and Lyra felt her body respond with an intensity that shocked her to the core. In Zathian culture, attraction was a clinical affair, a matter of genetic optimization and political advantage. Partnerships were arranged, emotions suppressed. What she felt now was raw, untamed, a hunger she'd never known, a fire that threatened to consume her carefully controlled world. "Humans," she murmured as Dream Kalen's hand caressed her face, his touch both gentle and electrifying. "So primitive in your passions, so free. Is that what you want?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Freedom. I don't know what I want," she admitted, a truth she'd never dared voice, even to herself, in her waking life. The scene shifted again. Now she was running, laughing, across the endless red desert. Kalen was beside her, his hand in hers, their laughter echoing under the twin suns. They were escaping, though from what, she didn't know. All she knew was the intoxicating joy, the exhilarating sense of being truly alive. "This isn't real," she told herself, even as her dream self leaned into him. "Does it matter?" Dream Kalen replied, his smile warm. "Sometimes the unreal shows us what we truly desire." Her fevered dreams cycled through terrifying lows and tender highs. But through them all, Kalen remained a constant, unwavering presence, protecting her, challenging her, seeing her. In one final, vivid flash, she stood before her father again, but this time, Kalen was at her side, his hand firmly holding hers. "I choose him," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "Not the mate you've selected." Her father's face contorted with rage. "Him. A human. You would disgrace our lineage for a primitive species." "They are not primitive," she countered, her voice soaring. "They feel everything we've taught ourselves to suppress. They embrace life. They're magnificent." The hallucination shattered, and she was back on the cot, alone, her body burning. But something else burned now, too. A realization. A truth. "Kalen," she whispered to the empty, silent ship. "Come back." Miles away, Kalen pushed himself harder. The trading post was so close. He could almost smell the recycled air. Lyra's vitals were dangerously low. "Hang on," he muttered, as if she could hear him. "Just hang on." Suddenly, his wristcom crackled, the ship's AI speaking directly into his helmet, its voice devoid of emotion but its message hitting him like a physical blow. "Warning. Patient exhibiting elevated hormonal activity consistent with Zathian reproductive cycle. Possible toxin interaction." Kalen froze. Zathian reproductive cycle. He knew the basics from his briefings, usually dormant, triggered by specific biochemical cues. Could the neurotoxin, could that cactus venom have done this? Triggered something ancient, powerful, and utterly unpredictable inside her. He broke into an all-out sprint. The burning in his lungs, the ache in his legs, they were nothing. He was no longer just racing against death. He was racing against something far more complex, something that could change everything. He had to get back. Now. The Zylosian desert blurred around Kalen as he ran, the twin suns like malevolent eyes burning into his back. The air was thin, searing his lungs, each stride an agony. But the real torment was the insistent, erratic beeping from the tricorder on his wrist, Lyra's fading life signs a constant, horrifying drumbeat against the backdrop of Xylos's alien silence. He had to reach that trading post. Had to. He'd faced down Cthar berserkers, navigated asteroid fields that would shred a lesser pilot, Even survived 90 seconds in hard vacuum during the Battle of Altair Prime. He could do this. He had to do this. The image of Lyra, so pale and vulnerable, haunted his every step. When had the insufferable princess become Lyra? The trading post, when he finally staggered into its dusty perimeter, was less an oasis and more a collection of prefabricated shacks huddled against a towering rock formation, looking like barnacles clinging to a sleeping giant. It reeked of stale spice, recycled air, and desperation. Not exactly a five-star resort, but if it had what he needed, it was paradise. He wasted no time, bursting into the largest structure, which appeared to be a combination bar and general store. A few grizzled patrons, a mix of species he vaguely recognized from Alliance wanted posters, eyed him with mild disinterest before returning to their glowing drinks. Behind a scarred metal counter stood a human, older than the landscape itself, his skin leathered by Xylos's twin sons, his eyes holding a knowing, weary wisdom. Xylosian neurospike antivenom, Kalen gasped, slapping his Alliance ID onto the counter, foregoing any pleasantries. His voice was rough, his throat raw. Emergency. Now. The trader raised a questioning eyebrow, his gaze lingering on the ID. Alliance, huh? Long way from home, aren't you, soldier? What's the mighty Terran Alliance doing poking around this particular backwater? His voice was a gravelly rasp. Private transport mission, Kalen replied curtly, his patience wearing thin. Lyra didn't have time for chit-chat. The antivenom. Please. The old trader shrugged, a slow, deliberate movement, then turned and retrieved a small, iridescent vial from a dusty shelf. The liquid inside shimmered with an unnatural blue light. This'll neutralize the primary neurotoxin, he said, placing it on the counter. But any secondary effects, well, those are on their own timeline. Always unpredictable with Xylosian flora. Secondary effects. Kalen frowned. The initial paralysis and potential death were bad enough. What else could there be? Depends on the species, the trader explained, his eyes glinting with something Kalen couldn't quite decipher. Some just get a nasty rash. Others, well, in some, there's a hormonal response. Especially in females of compatible humanoid species. He gave Kalen a very pointed, knowing look. She wouldn't happen to be a Zathian, would she? Orange-tinted skin, silver hair. Kalen's stunned silence must have been confirmation enough, because the trader let out a dry chuckle. Thought so. You might want this, too, then. He slid a second, smaller vial across the counter. This one contained a clear liquid. Hormone stabilizer. Standard issue for anyone dealing with a Zathian female in full reproductive heat. They can be quite intense, or so the legends say. Never seen it myself, mind you. Zathian? Legends? Kalen's mind reeled. The AI's warning, the accelerated hormonal activity. He felt a cold dread mix with the burning urgency. This was escalating beyond a simple medical emergency. What legends? Kalen pressed, his voice tight. The trader leaned in, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. Old Xylosian tales, son. They say the neurospike venom doesn't just trigger the cycle in Zathians. It amplifies it. Changes the nature of any bond formed during that time. Makes it deeper, more primal. Some say it can even reveal hidden compatibilities, or forge new ones where none existed. Course, it's just stories whispered by old desert rats. But you look like a man who's seen stranger things. Kalen hesitated for only a fraction of a second. He didn't have time to debate Zathian legends. He needed everything he could get. He scooped up both vials. How much? For the Alliance. No charge, soldier, the trader said, waving a dismissive hand. Just remember Outpost 37 next time your superiors are divvying up those lucrative supply contracts. A little goodwill goes a long way out here in the void. With a curt nod of thanks, Kalen turned and sprinted back towards the Hermes, the precious vials clutched tightly in his hand. The tricorder on his wrist was now beeping with an almost frantic, high-pitched whine. Lyra's hormonal readings were spiking off the charts, displaying patterns he'd never seen in any medical database. As he approached the crash site, a new, desperate sense of urgency filled him. It wasn't just about administering the antivenom anymore. It was about seeing her again, about understanding what was happening to her, to them. The realization caught him off guard. When had the annoying, entitled princess become someone he genuinely cared about? He practically tore the hatch open and burst into the ship, the antivenom held ready. He was prepared for the worst, but the sight that greeted him still made his breath catch in his throat. He practically tore the hatch open and burst into the ship, the antivenom held ready. He was prepared for the worst, but the sight that greeted him still made his breath catch in his throat. Lyra was writhing on the medical cot, her silver hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her normally pale orange skin flushed with an almost otherworldly, luminescent quality. Her eyes, usually so cool and appraising, were wide and wild. "Kalen," she gasped, her eyes flying open as if sensing his presence. "You came back." There was a raw, breathless quality to her voice he'd never heard. "Of course I did," he replied, his own voice rougher than intended. He moved quickly, already preparing the hypospray with the iridescent blue antivenom. "I said I would. Now hold still." Her hand shot out, catching his wrist with surprising, feverish strength. "You were in my dreams," she whispered, her gaze intense, pupils dilated. "So many dreams, you were there." Kalen felt a flush creep up his own neck but forced himself to maintain a professional demeanor. This was the toxin talking, the fever. The xylosian neurotoxin causes hallucinations. It's a known side effect. Now, hold still. This will help. He gently disengaged her fingers, his touch lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. He administered the antivenom, watching with a profound sense of relief as the medical scanner almost immediately showed the neurotoxin levels beginning to plummet. Lyra's ragged breathing steadied, and the pained, contorted expression on her face eased into something softer, though still troubled. "Better?" he asked, his voice gentler now, brushing a few damp silver strands from her forehead. The simple gesture felt strangely intimate. "The pain, it's receding," she confirmed, her voice still raspy. She shifted uncomfortably on the narrow cot. "But I feel strange. Hot. So incredibly hot, like my skin is too tight. Like there's a fire under my skin." Her eyes met his, and there was a new kind of heat in them, something that had nothing to do with fever. Kalen hesitated, then remembered the second vial, the clear liquid the old trader had pressed upon him. Hormone stabilizer. "The trader, he said this might happen," Kalen explained, trying to keep his voice neutral, businesslike. "The xylosian toxin, it can trigger certain hormonal responses in Zathian physiology. Especially when amplified by the venom. This should stabilize you." He held out the vial. Lyra's eyes widened with dawning recognition, then a flicker of something else, alarm. Or perhaps, understanding. Is that a hormone suppressant? She asked, her voice sharp despite her obvious weakness. Yes, it should counteract the... No. She pushed his hand away, her palm surprisingly firm against his. I cannot take that. Kalen frowned, bewildered. Lyra, you're experiencing a biochemical reaction to the toxin. This is designed to help. To normalize things. What was she thinking? This wasn't the time for Zathian pride or whatever archaic belief system was kicking in. You don't understand, she said, pushing herself up to a sitting position despite her evident weakness. Her gaze was unwavering. In Zathian culture, the reproductive cycle is sacred. It is the voice of our ancestors, the pulse of our lineage. To artificially suppress it, especially once it has begun, it would be sacrilegious. A deep dishonor. Even when it's triggered by an alien cactus venom on a deserted planet? Kalen asked, his skepticism evident. This was getting more complicated by the second. He felt like he'd stumbled into some ancient, high-stakes ritual he had no hope of understanding. A small, almost mischievous smile played at her lips, a ghost of her former haughtiness but softened now, made vulnerable. The cause doesn't matter, Kalen. Once begun, the cycle must complete. Naturally. Her eyes held his, a silent challenge. Kalen ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure exasperation. First a crash, then a poisoning, now a sacred Zathian, what exactly? And what precisely, he asked, trying to keep the mounting frustration from his voice, does this sacred cycle entail? Lyra's amber eyes, now clear and startlingly direct, met his. There was a new boldness in them, a primal fire that seemed to mirror the heat radiating from her skin. Increased body temperature, she began, her voice a low thrum. Heightened sensory awareness, and an intense, overwhelming desire. She said the last word with a deliberate, breathy emphasis that made Kalen's standard-issue alliance collar suddenly feel 2 sizes too small. His own temperature seemed to be rising. I see, he managed, trying to maintain some semblance of military composure, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He cleared his throat. And how long does this particular cycle last? He was grasping at straws, trying to inject some practicality into a situation rapidly spiraling into the surreal. Typically, 3 to 5 standard days, Lyra replied, a faint flush rising on her cheekbones. She glanced at the medical scanner, then back at him, her eyes holding a new, unervingly appraising look. Though in this instance, the xylosian toxin may have intensified things. Accelerated the process. Before Kalen could even begin to process the full implications of that particular bombshell, the ship's internal alarm system blared to life, a screeching cacophony that shattered the charged silence. Red warning lights began to flash, bathing the cramped medical bay in an ominous, pulsating glow. Warning. The ship's synthesized voice announced, calm and utterly indifferent to their personal drama. Class 5 dust storm approaching. Estimated arrival, 15 minutes. Duration, unknown. Recommend immediate lockdown and power conservation. Kalen swore under his breath and moved instantly to the cockpit, Lyra forgotten for the moment as his training kicked in. He checked the environmental sensors. The readouts confirmed his worst fears. A massive, swirling wall of reddish-brown dust, a common and lethal phenomenon on Xylos, was bearing down on their position. It was powerful enough to scour the paint from the Hermes's already damaged hull, to clog vital systems, to bury them alive. Perfect timing, he muttered grimly, returning to the medical bay where Lyra was now attempting to stand, her legs still unsteady. "We're about to be hit by a major dust storm. We need to secure everything, power down all non-essential systems to conserve what little energy we have left." Lyra swayed dangerously, and Kaelin instinctively caught her by the shoulders, steadying her. The contact, brief as it was, sent a visible shiver through her body, and a jolt through his. "Sorry," she whispered, her gaze dropping, not meeting his eyes. "The heightened sensitivity, it's pronounced." Kaelin nodded, trying to maintain a respectful distance while still supporting her. His mind was racing. Trapped. With her. In this state. "Can you walk? We should move to the crew quarters. They're slightly better insulated against temperature fluctuations than this medbay." Together, stumbling slightly, they made their way to the small, utilitarian living area. Kaelin helped Lyra settle onto one of the narrow bunks, then quickly busied himself securing loose items, checking seals, and powering down everything but essential life support and the emergency lights. "How long will we be trapped in here?" Lyra asked, her voice small as she watched him work. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet apprehension. "These Silosian storms, they can last anywhere from a few hours to several days," Kaelin replied, sealing the last storage compartment with a decisive click. "We have enough supplies, but we'll need to be extremely careful with power consumption." As if on cue, the ship shuddered violently as the first winds of the storm hit, the sound of sand hissing and scouring against the hull like thousands of tiny, angry snakes. Kaelin dimmed the already low emergency lights further, plunging them into a soft, intimate crimson glow. He sat on the bunk opposite hers, the space between them suddenly feeling very small, very charged. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble against the rising howl of the wind outside. "Looks like we're stuck here together. Just the two of us." Lyra's amber eyes gleamed in the low light, a strange, unreadable emotion swirling in their depths. "Indeed," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Just as I was entering a Zathian reproductive cycle." "Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say, Captain?" Lyra Zatha's amber eyes snapped open, her body a battleground of heat and shivering. "Indeed," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the storm's rising fury, each word a struggle. "Just as I was entering a Zathian reproductive cycle." "Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say, Captain?" The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor, flinging them into a desperate fight for survival just as ancient, undeniable biology decided to make its claim. How could one planet hold so much peril and, dare she think it, possibility? Kaelin Vance could only stare. Terrible timing, he agreed, though his tone held a grudging respect for the universe's sheer audacity. Or perhaps it was for Lyra herself, meeting his gaze with a fire that belied her weakened state. The storm howled outside, a physical manifestation of the chaos erupting within the cramped confines of the Hermes. This wasn't just about survival anymore, this was about navigating a minefield of Zathian tradition, unexpected desire, and the raw, untamed forces of nature, both outside and within.